The morning after the Mustang rescue dawned with a fundamentally different light. The heavy, oppressive cloud of sorrow and confusion that had choked the air at Heartland for weeks had finally blessedly broken. In its place was a fragile, sun-drenched hope. The powerful three-way hug in the forest had been a reset, a profound and wordless declaration that they were, against all odds, still a family. But for Ty, the moment of catharsis had given way to a new and more complicated turmoil. The decision he had made to let Amy go, a choice born from what he believed was selfless love, now felt like a terrible, misguided mistake. And the path back from that decision was a terrifying, uncharted wilderness. The most immediate change was Lindy. The shy, cautious girl who had treated him like a confusing stranger was gone. In her place was a bright, bubbly shadow who followed her father everywhere, her eyes shining with a hero worship that was both wonderful and heartbreaking for Ty to behold. She peppered him with questions as he did his morning chores, her small hand often finding its way into his. "Is the wild horse's leg all better today, Daddy? Are you going to go check on him? Can I come? Can we bring him an apple?" Ty would answer each question patiently, the word Daddy a beautiful aching melody he thought he might never hear again. This newfound adoration was a balm to his soul, but it was also a torment, a constant joyful reminder of exactly what he had been prepared to give away. His internal conflict was a raging, silent war. Tim's fiery words echoed in one ear, "You fight for them," while his own sad, logical conclusion echoed in the other, "Her life is peaceful without you." He was trapped between a ghost's warning and a broken man's resolve. He was in the barn, lost in this internal battle as he restocked the shelves of the vet clinic. The work was a comfort, a small piece of his old life that he could control. He was so engrossed in taking inventory that he didn't hear Amy enter, her footsteps soft on the hay-strewn floor. She was carrying a large, steaming thermos, a genuine, gentle smile on her face. The dark circles of exhaustion that had been a permanent fixture under her eyes for weeks seemed lighter this morning. The hug in the woods had been a release for her, too, a moment of uncomplicated, right-feeling connection that had soothed her own frayed nerves. "Figured you could use this. You were up half the night checking on that Mustang." She set the thermos down on a clear patch of the counter. The coffee inside was his favorite blend, the one he liked with a hint of cinnamon. It was a small detail, a memory from their shared past that she had held on to. "Thanks, Amy. I didn't even realize how late it was."
You were amazing yesterday. I haven't seen you like that in, well, a long time. It was good to see Ty. Really good.
She reached out, her gesture instinctive, and placed a hand on his arm, giving it a gentle squeeze. It was an unconscious act of affection and pride, a simple touch that was meant to convey everything she couldn't yet put into words. The touch lingered for a moment longer than was strictly necessary, a warm, grounding pressure that sent a jolt through Ty's entire system. He looked down at her hand on his arm, then up into her eyes, and what he saw there was not the cautious, confused woman of the past few weeks, but a glimmer of the Amy he remembered, his Amy full of warmth and an open, unguarded love. Just a few stalls down, Jack was meticulously mending a piece of tack, his gnarled, capable hands working the leather. He had been a silent observer of the entire exchange. He saw Amy bring the coffee, saw the small, intimate touch, and most importantly, he saw the look of profound, shell-shocked confusion it caused on Ty's face. Amy, feeling a sudden shyness under Ty's intense gaze, pulled her hand back, a faint blush on her cheeks.
Well, let me know if you need anything. Grandpa and I are going to be working on the paddock fence.
Okay, I will.
She gave him one last, soft smile and then walked out of the clinic, leaving him standing there, the phantom warmth of her hand still burning on his arm. Ty stared after her, his mind a chaotic whirl. That touch, the look in her eyes, it didn't fit with his theory. It didn't fit with the woman who had moved on, who was in love with someone else. He looked over and saw Jack watching him. The old man didn't speak. He just met Ty's gaze and gave a single, slow, almost imperceptible nod, a subtle lift of an eyebrow that conveyed a universe of meaning. It was a silent, powerful statement. "See? What did I tell you? Open your eyes, son." The combination of Amy's gesture and Jack's knowing look was the final catalyst. Ty felt the foundations of his tragic, self-sacrificing decision begin to crumble. He was at war with himself, his heart and his head locked in a brutal, exhausting conflict. The logical side of his brain, The side that had watched Amy laugh with Nathan screamed that he was seeing what he wanted to see, that a single touch didn't erase 4 years of history. It argued that his decision to let her go was still the most mature, the most loving thing he could do. But his heart, reawakened by the hug in the woods and the warmth of her hand on his arm, was telling a different story. It was whispering the words Tim had roared at him, that a love like theirs was a miracle worth fighting for, no matter how hard, no matter how broken they both were. He couldn't trust his own judgment anymore. He was too close, too wounded, too lost in the fog of his own pain. He needed a guide. He needed a voice of reason that wasn't fueled by the fire of Tim's regrets or the quiet sorrow of his own. He needed Jack. He walked out of the barn and into the bright sunlight, his purpose now clear. He found Jack by the paddock. Just as Amy had said, he was alone, testing the tension of a newly strung wire. Ty walked up to him, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his heart pounding. "Jack?" Jack looked up, his expression calm and patient, as if he had been expecting him. "Can we talk?" Jack looked up from the fence wire, his gaze steady and knowing. He saw the raw, desperate conflict in Ty's eyes, the look of a man drowning and finally reaching for a lifeline. He methodically wiped his hands on a rag, his movements calm and unhurried, a silent signal that he had all the time in the world.
"Let's go sit on the porch."
It wasn't a question. He led the way back to the main house, the two of them walking in a comfortable silence. They settled into the familiar, weathered rocking chairs on the front porch, a place that had witnessed generations of Heartland's triumphs and tribulations. The late afternoon sun was warm on their faces, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the tall poplar trees that lined the driveway. For a long moment, the only sound was the gentle creak of the chairs and the distant, contented nicker of a horse. Ty stared out at the sprawling, sun-drenched fields, gathering his thoughts, trying to find the words for the chaotic, tangled mess in his soul. Jack waited, his patience a vast, quiet space for Ty to fill. Finally, Ty began to speak, his voice low and strained. He started at the beginning, not of the last few days, but of the decision itself, the one he had made in the lonely, terrible silence of the guest room. He told Jack everything. He spoke of the sleepless night, of the ghosts of his past life with Amy, and of the profound, heartbreaking certainty he had felt that he was an obstacle to her happiness. He explained his flawed, tragic logic that after 4 years her life had healed in a new shape, a shape that included Nathan, and that his return was a violent disruption to that hard-won peace. He confessed the details of the drunken, messy dinner, the moment he had told Nathan to take his place to make her happy.
I thought it was the right thing to do, Jack. The most loving thing. To set her free.
He then recounted Tim's furious, passionate intervention, the words that had shaken his resolve to its core.
And then Tim. He looked at me like I was the lowest thing on earth. He said I was a coward, that I was taking the easy way out, just like he did. He told me to fight. And then yesterday, with the Mustang, and the hug, and this morning, with the coffee.
His voice trailed off, his confusion a tangible thing. Tim says I have to fight. My own gut told me to let her go. I don't know what to do. I feel like any move I make is the wrong one, and I'm just going to break her all over again. He finished, the whole tangled, impossible story laid bare in the warm afternoon air. He finally looked at his father-in-law, his expression one of desperate appeal, silently begging for an answer, for a map out of this wilderness. Jack continued to rock gently, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. He had listened to the entire confession without a single interruption, his face a mask of quiet, profound empathy. When he finally spoke, his voice was not one of judgment, but of deep, compassionate understanding.
"I understand why you did it, Ty. Every bit of it. You came back from something no one should have to endure, and you walked into a life you didn't recognize. You saw your wife, the woman you love, with another man who was kind to her and to your daughter, and you thought the only noble thing to do was to step aside. Your heart, as misguided as it was in the right place."
The validation, the simple act of being understood, brought a fresh wave of tears to Ty's eyes. Jack let him absorb it for a moment before he gently, deliberately began to dismantle Ty's entire argument.
"But you made one fundamental mistake. A mistake so big it invalidates the whole thing."
Ty looked at him, his brow furrowed.
"In all of this, in all your thinking and your planning and your noble sacrifice, did you ever once stop and ask Amy what she wants?"
The question was so simple, so direct, that it struck Ty with the force of a physical blow. He opened his mouth to answer, but no words came. You made this whole decision based on a few moments you witnessed from a distance. A laugh, a kind gesture from a good man. But you're a smart man, Ty. You're a vet. You're trained to look at all the evidence before you make a diagnosis. What about the other evidence? What about the woman who slept all night on a hard wooden stool in a cold clinic, just to be near you while you slept? Which of those two actions tells you more about where her heart truly is? Ty's mind flashed back to that morning, to the incredible, shocking sight of her asleep beside him. And what about yesterday, in the woods, when that Mustang was saved, and your family came together, and you held your wife and daughter in your arms? Did you see the look in her eyes then? Was that the look of a woman who wants to be let go? As if on cue, the front door opened, and Amy stepped out onto the porch. She was carrying 2 tall glasses of lemonade, beads of condensation running down the sides. She smiled, a soft, warm expression that was still tinged with a hint of worried curiosity about their serious talk.
Looked like you two were solving the world's problems. I thought you might be thirsty.
She handed a glass to Jack, and then to Ty. Her fingers brushed against his as he took the glass, and the small, simple touch was a jolt of pure, undeniable connection.
Dinner will be ready in about an hour, Grandpa?
Thanks, honey. We'll be in soon.
She gave Ty one last, gentle smile before turning and disappearing back into the house. Jack waited until the door had clicked shut. He then turned to Ty, who was staring at the glass in his hand as if it were a holy relic. Jack didn't say a word. He just raised a single, knowing eyebrow. The silent, powerful gesture said it all. See what I mean? Ty looked at the lemonade, a simple act of domestic care. He thought of the blanket in the clinic, a quiet act of love. He thought of her hug in the woods, an act of pure, unadulterated joy. He had been so lost in the grand, tragic narrative he had written for himself, the story of the noble ghost who had to disappear for the sake of his living wife, that he had completely failed to read the much simpler, more beautiful story that was being written right in front of him every single day. He had been making decisions for her, about her, without her. He had been so focused on the pain of the last 4 years that he had ignored the hope of the next 40. The realization washed over him, a profound and humbling wave of clarity. Tim had been right, Jack was right, his own broken heart had been wrong. He looked up at Jack, his eyes no longer clouded with confusion, but shining with a new terrifying and brilliant resolve. He knew what he had to do. Ty sat on the porch swing, the cool glass of lemonade sweating in his hand, his world completely upended. The foundations of the tragic, noble reality he had constructed for himself had been systematically dismantled by Jack's quiet, simple questions. He had been so sure, so certain in his heartbreaking conclusion. He had gathered his evidence, held his solitary trial, and passed his lonely verdict, all without ever speaking to the one person who mattered. He had been so focused on interpreting the shadows of the last 4 years that he had become completely blind to the brilliant, unwavering light of Amy's love that had been shining on him since the moment he returned. He replayed the moments Jack had laid out before him, each one a piece of a puzzle he had refused to see. He saw Amy, her face etched with worry, sleeping on a hard, uncomfortable stool in the cold, dusty clinic, a silent, all-night vigil just to be near him. He saw her in the kitchen, her hands bringing him a thermos of his favorite coffee, a small, intimate detail she had carried in her heart for 4 years. He saw her on this very porch, bringing him a cool drink on a hot day, a simple, domestic act of care. He felt the ghost of her hand on his arm in the barn, a touch that was not one of pity, but of pride. He had seen all these things, but he had dismissed them. He had explained them away as the lingering habits of a past relationship, the compassionate gestures of a friend. He had refused to see them for what they truly were, the desperate, unconscious actions of a woman trying to reconnect with the husband she still loved. He had been so convinced he was a ghost that he failed to see he was still the most solid and real thing in her world. The sheer, arrogant folly of his decision washed over him, a wave of profound and humbling shame. He had stood in a restaurant and given another man his blessing to pursue his wife. He had told his father-in-law he was letting his family go. He had made the biggest, most consequential decision of their lives entirely on his own, based on a flawed, fearful interpretation of events. Tim had called him a coward, and Ty had bristled at the word. But now, in the clear, sharp light of Jack's wisdom, he saw the truth. He hadn't been acting out of selfless love. He had been acting out of fear. A deep, paralyzing fear that he was no longer enough, that the broken man who came back could never measure up to the memory of the man who had left. Letting her go wasn't a sacrifice. It was a retreat. A new feeling began to smolder in the pit of his stomach, replacing the cold, sad resignation. It was a fierce, protective, and powerful resolve. The confusion was gone. The doubt was gone. He knew with a certainty that vibrated through his entire being what he had to do. He was done being a ghost. He was done being a spectator in his own life. He was done letting his fear make his decisions for him. Tim was right. Jack was right. It was time to fight. He stood up from the swing, his movement so full of a new, decisive energy that Jack looked over, a slow, knowing smile spreading across his face. Ty met his gaze and gave a single, firm nod, a silent thank you that conveyed everything. He set his untouched glass of lemonade down and walked into the house, his purpose clear. He found Lindy in the living room, building another one of her elaborate Lego castles. He knelt down beside her, his heart swelling with a love so powerful it almost hurt. "Hey, Bug, that's the best castle you've ever built." "It's for a queen. She's a warrior queen." "Of course she is, just like your mom." He smoothed her hair back from her forehead, his touch gentle. "I love you more than anything in the world. You know that, right?" "I know, Daddy. I love you too." She gave him a quick, sweet hug before turning back to her important work. It was all the fuel he needed. He stood up and went to find his wife. The barn was her sanctuary, and it would be the place he would begin to rebuild theirs. He found her in the main aisle, methodically cleaning a saddle, her movements a familiar, comforting rhythm. She didn't hear him approach. He just stood there for a long moment, watching her. He took in the way the late afternoon sun slanted through the high windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air and catching the golden strands in her hair. He looked at the strength in her hands, the quiet grace in her posture. He had been so blind. Finally, he spoke her name, his voice quiet but full of a new, rich warmth that made her still. "Amy." She turned, and the look on her face was one of weary, cautious expectation. She was bracing herself for another day of his kind, heartbreaking distance. But that's not what she saw. The haunted, sad man was gone. In his place stood her husband, his eyes clear, intense, and shining with a raw, powerful emotion she hadn't seen in 4 long years. He closed the distance between them, his gaze never leaving hers. "Ty, is everything okay?" He stopped just in front of her, his presence so full of a new energy it was almost overwhelming.
No, nothing is okay. But I think it's going to be.
He reached out, his hand gently taking the rag from hers and tossing it aside. He then took both of her hands in his grip firm and sure. "We need to talk. For real this time. No more secrets, no more misunderstandings, no more me thinking I know what's best for you." His thumb gently stroked the back of her hand, sending a shiver through her.
I've been a fool, Amy. A blind, terrified fool. And I am so sorry.
She stared at him, speechless, her heart pounding. This was it. This was the moment she had been praying for, the breakthrough she had begun to believe would never come. He leaned in, his forehead coming to rest against hers, his eyes closing for a moment as if he were savoring the simple, profound reality of her proximity.
I'm not letting you go,
he whispered, his voice a raw, ragged promise. "I'm never letting you go again." And then he kissed her. It was not a tentative, questioning kiss. It was a kiss of profound, absolute certainty. It was a kiss that contained 4 years of loss, weeks of confusion, and a lifetime of love. It was a promise, a declaration, and a homecoming. Amy's surprise melted into a deep, shuddering sigh of relief, and she kissed him back, her hands coming up to frame his face, tears of pure, unadulterated joy finally, freely, streaming down her cheeks. The wall between them hadn't just been breached, it had been completely and utterly demolished. And in the quiet, sunlit barn, surrounded by the ghosts of their past, they finally, truly began again.